Today,
Yes.
today is the focus on communication through signs, symbols, and metaphors within theatre and performances. And I'll go through some subjects that are relevant for what we've been talking about or introduced to during this class, at least as far as I know, but also what I think since you've been through in the meantime. And that will sort of sum up what we've gone through from the futurist theatre to post-traumatic theatre, deconstructivism that we have not spoken about yet, but it's kind of very relevant for post-traumatic theatre. Then we have revolutionary spaces, interdisciplinary scenography after postmodern theatre, and that's with the focus on my thesis, Hamlet Machine. And then there's another example of a newer performance from 2009. It's called Girl Machine from New York. It's a futurist-inspired performance. So you can see how these ideas can be adapted into this century within performance. And then I'll go through a list of design processes that I've written down, which is basically the way I work as a set designer from beginning to end of a production. And today I have chosen, because I'm writing a book on this subject, revolutionary spaces, interdisciplinary, blah, blah, blah. And I've written a lot because I'm writing a textbook on it with a focus on interdisciplinary set design contemporary. And therefore, this time I have chosen to simply print out the text that I've written and then read it out loud for you instead of talking and improvising, etc. So let me start today with talking about the futurist theatre and performance. And I would like to see slide 2, which is this one. And then I have added some examples, images of performances that we've gone through or briefly mentioned throughout this class. And the first one for the futurist theatre is the one from 1922, and that is specifically futurist theatre. In this case, an intertwine between Italian idea manifestos and the Russian futurism. And this example is very mechanical, and that's what and about movements and speed and technology. So to get into the futurism again, the Futurist Manifesto, written by the wealthy Italian poet Filippo Tommaso Marinetti in 1909, rejected the past in favor of violence, war, and technological innovations such as the telephone, aircraft, the car, engine, speed, and electricity. Can you hear what I'm saying? Is it clear enough? Yeah. Too fast or too slow? Or? Okay, cool. Futurist theatre used multimedia in their work and established the marriage of art and technology in performance. They used telephones on stage and projected images. Sound came from multiple and unexpected sources. Electricity offered new illuminating visual effects in a performance. To confuse and surprise and provoke the audience into action, performers were speaking in robotic voices while declaiming with their legs and arms, holding diverse noise instruments, using variations in speed, rhythm, and sound. They rejected the linear narratives of a text and suggested that language no longer could express a modern worldview. The idea was to activate all parts of the theatre, including the audience. The inferno of set machinery in action, robotic acting actors, sound and light effects was meant to provoke the audience to pay attention to the futurist ideas. Futurist theatre changed the dynamics between performers and an audience. They wanted the performance to be a shared experience and to place the spectator at the center of the activity. Futurism tried to change existing stagnant theatre practices and questioned what theatre was meant to be doing in society. It also celebrated the modernization of Italy, and that was very important. I would like to go to slide 3, which is then we go to post-dramatic theatre. And then I show some examples on post-dramatic theatre performances that we also have gone through and mentioned, and that is, for example, Wilson's Einstein on the Beach from 1976, with Jan Faber's Helena Trouble in 1992, and it is Franz Kastorf's Hand Machine from the Volksbühne in Berlin. And then we have the latest production of forced entertainment. They are all post-dramatic theatre performances. A post-dramatic paradigm shift has occurred in theatre studies since the 1960s. But it wasn't until the publication of Hans Thies Lehmann's book Post-Dramatic Theatre in 2009, which was not translated into English until a few years ago. I think maybe 2006 actually. That post-dramatic theatre was defined as a genre. Post-dramatic theatre is characterized by site-specific work and its inventive response to the emergence of new technologies, and by a shift from a text-based culture to a new media, age and image and sound, like the futurists did in their time. Post-dramatic theatre strategies go beyond realism and a conventional theatrical symbolism or metaphorical presentation. The actors no longer portray characters to identify with. Music, live video, and references to contemporary pop and media culture are integrated. It creates challenging customary genre distinctions between drama, dance, and performance art, and is occupied with the aesthetics of time and space, the representation of the body, and the use of media. Post-dramatic theatre are dissatisfied with the drama's two fundamental processes, the representation of the external world and the structuring of time. Post-dramatic theatre is a theatre after drama, as it no longer focuses on the written dramatic text. It strives to produce an effect amongst the spectators instead of to remain true to the text. Drama, Lehmann argues, is characterized by narrative, by dialectics. Post-dramatic theatre, in contrast, occurs when the progression of a story with its internal logic no longer forms the center, when composition is no longer experienced as an organizing quality, but as an artificially imposed manufacture. Post-dramatic productions may fit in the category text-based, yet they go beyond conventionally representing texts realistically or symbolically. Instead, they embody, visualize, and spatialize their narratives. No longer hierarchically structured, dominated by the text, and nor driven by the representation of narratives, thus representing them as side of experience and non-hierarchy, in which each element of a performance aesthetic is given equal weight. Post-dramatic performances, texts disintegrate traditional notions of character, dramaturgy, and unity of action, time, and space by splitting the common binary opposite of presence versus representation, semiotic versus symbolic, etc., into their opposite terms, and playing those terms off against each other in performance. And I will also talk more about semiotics, which can be a little complicated, but let's try it later. The orientation provided by recognizable characters, plot lines, dissolves, no plot at all, and concentrates fully on the interaction between text and audience, which leads to a greater integration of the audience into meaning-making processes. And some names associated with post-dramatic theatre are those shown below. Do you have any questions before I go on? And I'm not talking too fast or anything? Good. Because it's kind of heavy, the content. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, number 4. Thank you. And this is an example of deconstructivism. And I use the example of Frank Gehry's Walt Disney Center, which it's almost finished 10 years ago. And deconstructivism is a development of postmodern architecture that began in the late 1980s. It's influenced by theory of deconstruction, which is a form of semiotic analysis. This theory was defined in 1968 by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida. Deconstructivism is a disconnection from cultural references with a tendency toward deformation and dislocation, characterized by unpredictability and controlled chaos. It's characterized by fragmentation and interest in manipulating a structure, surface, or skin, non-rectilinear shapes which appear to distort and dislocate elements of architecture. While postmodernism returned to embrace historical references, deconstructivism rejected the postmodern acceptance of such references, as well as the idea of ornament as an afterthought or decoration. Deconstruction is an essential element in postmodern and post-dramatic theatre. Deconstructivist theatre is notorious for that it's almost impossible to get what it means and what it's supposed to look like, because definitions are the very heart of what it fights against. It is the search for connection between individuals by fully realizing personal interpretation rather than cementing down a falsely universal view by parroting it over and over. When Derrida looks at historical events, particularly after World War II, he sees contradictions and tangles popping up all over. He sees hierarchies, European over non-European, male over female, being disturbed, if not overturned. He sees political and economic systems growing unstable, being revealed as impossible, and he sees scientific and technological change causing such deconstructions to occur at an accelerating rate. Deconstruction is basically to reject what we know conventionally and define as beautiful and true, and through the deconstruction of recognizable content, flipping the contents around and make stability unstable, so that a predefined meaning no longer exists. Derrida warns against just opposed meanings, but also implies to juxtapose meanings or reinstate the opposite sign. By inserting the opposite sign one simply creates a new meaning. Deconstructivism is about how to open up new angles of interpretation. Antonin Artaud and Bertolt Brecht were actively engaged in these kind of productions. Postmodern theatre used linguistics and visual shifts and breaking up of signs and symbols to allow for multiple interpretations. To apply deconstructivism in postmodern theatre, it's important to understand the American philosopher Charles Peirce's sign theory from 1939, which is a system with three categories: symbol, index, and icon. Peirce called his field semiotics, the study of signs and meaning. Signs are words, images, behavior, human and animal arrangements of many kinds, in which the meaning is relayed by a corresponding outward manifestation. The falling leaves in autumn, for instance, are a sign of the coming winter. Trees have no necessary connection to the idea of a tree, but the idea of a tree rather than the tree, the idea of the tree rather than the tree itself. Peirce separates the sign from the object. He worked out a classification of signs which sees the signs not as monolithic in their relationship to the object, but as related to the object in different ways and to different degrees. A symbol, a word, for example, has an arbitrary relation to its object. An index, however, a finger pointing to indicate direction, for instance, has a closer relation to its object. An icon, a photograph of someone or an actor playing a part, has a strong resemblance to its object. Despite these graduations, Peirce insists that a sign stands for something which is not present, thus reinforcing the absence of the recognizable object. By unsettling the stability of textual semiotic signifiers, which is notably binary opposites. Deconstruction allows an open interpretation of its translation. There's no longer a fixed meaning, it opposes the aesthetic. In performances influenced by the deconstructivist theories, no word, idea, text, or subject is what it was intended to be. Nothing is identical with itself. In this way, identity and meaning are deferred. The audience becomes an equal performer of the situation, and every audience is different. Theatrical performance, in Pierce's terms, is about how the audience receives and interprets signs, the semiotics of the entire theater experience, the appearance of the auditorium, the displays in the lobby, the information in the program, and countless other parts of the event as a whole, and the relationship of theater to the life it represents. Signs are instruments under human control. Good theater exercises this control in the service of understanding. Postmodern performance restores critical distance, which allows us to reconsider the world we live in, a world where theater itself have a critical connection to postmodern culture. The individual is subjective, positioned in a world as variable as our own will. We have passed the end of a century with intense activity in the area of cultural theory. Cultural theory, of course, began at least as far back as the ancient Greece. Now we live in a time where we through the internet have access to multiple cultural signs and symbols, which was much harder to get access to in the past, and the meanings can be inserted in new ways, so deconstructed that a new universal language could appear. A language which is an underlying pattern for communication through semiotics, a call for the bringing together of disparate elements in new and unexpected ways. Müller, who wrote The Hamlet Machine, has said, the only postmodernist I know of was August Schramm, a modernist who worked in a post office, and yet when asked where he would prefer to mount his plays, he answers, I would like to stage Macbeth on the top of the World Trade Center for an audience in helicopters, which sounds, in terms of technology and capital, the recontextualization of the past and the complicity of the artist with the established order, like a postmodern performance, if ever there was one. And that was said by Heiner Müller, who was the author of The Hamlet Machine.
What was Schramm?
He was a theater maker also, but he was working in a post office.
Yeah, right. Like Bukowski.
Yeah, and Kafka was also, I don't know, that was in the post office, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's S-C-H-R-U-M, Schramm?
S-T-R-A-M-M. August Schramm.
August?
Schramm, yeah. So I would like to go to slide number 5. Let me have some more. Okay, now we come to revolutionary spaces. Interdisciplinary set design. After postmodern theater, set design for Hamlet Machine by Heiner Müller, and that was my thesis, the Hamlet Machine, back in 1998. I graduated from the Royal College of Art in Copenhagen in set design, master's degree, and studying in Berlin for 2 years under Achim Freyer, with whom we mentioned earlier, in a class of 5 students, and I learned a lot there and was influenced. But I'll read it for you. Revolutionary Spaces focuses on interdisciplinary scenography, set design, constructed after 2000. Scenography is a term used in Europe instead of set design. So that's why I had used that word, scenography. And so, constructed after 2000, and therefore the attempt to answer the question, what is contemporary interdisciplinary set design? Set design has in recent years moved in many directions and revolutionary spaces. Is based on the thesis that a new generation of set designs has grown forward, which have challenged previous genre descriptions and are co-creators of a future performance landscape. There are some scenarios that we stand in a transition phase where set design now, as never before in history, is characterized by a shift in change or transformation. And I'm trying to define what is contemporary interdisciplinary set design. So we'll go to Set Design for Hamlet Machine by Heiner Müller, Semiotics and Icons. I became aware in Berlin during my studies from 1995 to 7. I also became aware and also inspired by the postmodern theater, its theatrical theories and works. Consequently, as a thesis project in 1998, I chose the Hamlet Machine. The Hamlet Machine is an early postmodern text written before the Hans T. Schliemann post-dramatic theater theories were published, which was in 1999, and the text was written in 1997. The term post-dramatic indicates a theater after the text. A drama means a theatrical text. Early in my research for the Hamlet Machine, I realized that especially the works and theories by Antonina Toh, Bertolt Brecht, Jacques Derrida, Carl Gustav Jung, Stanislaw Grof, Gertrude Stein, and the structuralist Charles Peirce would be relevant as interpretive tools for my own staging of the Hamlet Machine. Applied works and the theories of the above gave my interpretation of Hamlet Machine the possibility of freeing myself from the temptation to generate harmonious scene images. Deconstructivism allows an open interpretation where there's no longer one single meaning. The Hamlet Machine is characterized by the absence of a plot. The text consists of sequences of aggregated fragmentation, events bouncing in time, which breaks up the stability of continuous time and textual signifiers. With references to numerous literary works and the intense use of allusions, for example, to Shakespeare's Richard III, the Third Reich, the Third Kingdom under Hitler, Hamlet's place of study, Wittenberg University in Germany, revolutions, and Karl Marx, the characters and events in the text are turned into fragments of world history. The Hamlet Machine contained the prerequisites to be looked at from the fundamental tenets of postmodern theater and deconstructivism. The Hamlet Machine is built of complex contradictions, where the messages are entangled in a net which has no linear pattern, but with probably more threads that can be viewed from different directions. And so we come to the description of the text. Written in 1977 by East German playwright Heiner Müller, Hamlet Machine is a reduction to just 8 pages of the text and condensed down to a list of Western civilizations, evolution from the glacial epoch to contemporary times and to the dystopian future of climate disaster. Events are relocated to a world history in relative chronological order, yet still distorted and even recreated. The Hamlet here is in an identity crisis that develops into psychosis, the condition mainly due to his despair and disillusionment of witnessing various ages of failed revolutions, where growing consumer culture betrays the past and carries with it a cycle of violence. He recognizes similar historical patterns repeating themselves in different eras. Hamlet's schism builds up since he, in Carl Gustav Jung's terminology, does not acknowledge his own subconscious and fails to integrate intellect with emotion. He realizes that his beloved classical philosophy is not sufficient to create social change. And he doubts in both his own identity and the survival of culture, and circles down in a growing frenzy, which is a split between the masculine and feminine, mixed with memory flashes and the breaking up of his own linearity. Hamlet's split nature is a response to the Western canon's representation of the intellectual faced with misfired revolutionary changes. And his debate ends with a wish for fusion between man and machine. The text also points to the notion of the age of technological opportunities, where concepts such as post-humanism, cyborg bodies, virtual reality, and robots can become a reality. The Hamlet machine is a critique on society and the self-ironic opposite facing mankind's intellect in the Western world. Hamlet is an identity seeker in a struggle to make sense of doomsday's events, but ends as a tragic figure who capitulates and denies love as well as the human species. So this is, I can see this quality of the picture is not very good actually, I'm sorry. It was done, this is pictures of the set design for Hamlet machine from 1998. And we didn't really use so much digital technology, so it's my thesis project and not sufficiently documented, the pictures. And that's one very important thing I would say for you guys, if you do work, remember to document the two pictures very well. It's really, really important. So in my staging of the Hamlet machine, I let everything take place in a site-specific 80-meter tall gas silo. 80 meters is 280 feet, which is how much I'm not sure, it's very tall.
It's like 28 stories, you know, it's like 25 stories.
Okay,
tall.
and this is the one.
It's a giant gas tank.
It's a giant gas silo container in Copenhagen, so that's a site-specific work. It's not realized in reality because we couldn't get into the silo. This is just a theoretical project because there was not time or money for building it, the production. It would have cost millions probably. But who knows? No, it's a thesis and one is allowed to build big, I guess. So in this case, found architectural performance space and transgressing borders between audience and performers were my focal points, fostering new ways of testing the barrier between the audience and performers in order to break down the line between art and reality, inspired by ideas from Brecht, Artaud, and a few other theater practitioners and theorists. My intent was to explore the art of theatrical scenography, set design, from challenging gravity to creating a language through non-realistic imagery, and to explore the interaction of the audience and the stage. This staging questioned how and where the viewer experienced recognition and intuitive understanding of the content of the performance and set design as it relates to the environment of the action on stage. The play leaps, the dramatic text leaps in and out of different cultural eras and time zones, and so does the play. The main concept was to create a three-dimensional collage of a degenerating culture through defragmentation and the assembling of the past into the present and future. This set design lets everything take place on a circular stage constructed inside the silo, inspired by the shape of an ancient amphitheater. In a theatrical context, Greek theater is the root of the Western world's theater tradition. The circle concept was developed to present a cyclical model of time as a container for the text content. The audience is seated in the center of the silo on an illuminated transparent circular floor encircled by the entire stage. So this is a model, scale model, 1 to 20, I guess, of the set design, where the audience is supposed to be placed here in the center of the stage, and this circle is enormous. It's all the way around a total closed circle system with 5 layers from down and up, and different set designs place different places on the set, and it's all meant to be located within the silo, the gas container. So that means it's going to be in the bottom, and then there's this high void, 80 meters up of darkness. So this is more like a collage, and you see the background here. This is more like a visual, inspirational collage. The background with the Greek theater out there, And then there are some collages, which is an example on how I work. In the beginning state of doing a set design or designing one, creating visuals, collages that are still very abstract, but sort of like attached to each scene in the play, in the drama. And this is so the collages up on top. So let's go to the next slide, which is number 6, circles. This is an overview, technical drawing of the circle seen from above. And on each of them, I only have 3 of them. There are 5 acts in the performance of the play. I have 3. This is a picture of Act 2, the Europe woman in the Hamlet machine. Act 3, Scherzo. Act 4, Kerstin Buller's Battle for Greenland. And the drawings is the lines out here. So let me take this. Every circle has a time zone, and I'll come into and the drawings, the marked areas is where the set design is in each act, so to speak. So the circular stays encircling the audience is constructed on 5 different annular levels. The varied scenography spans over more layers in order to create the experience of fragments of events and the jumping in time. This enabled me to construct images, different stages on all the levels around the audience, giving them a heightened experience of the different time zones, each time frame attached with different historical events. Time is illustrated circularly from the rear and above to the front and down towards the audience. So it's from here in the rear and towards the audience in the middle in the circle. The past is the furthest away from the audience and present right in front of them. The audience sits in a figurative sense in the future, because the front row, the front circle is the now. This would be the now, and if you were sitting here, this would be the future you were sitting on as the audience. Behind the first annular rear ring and out into the space, there's nothing. A great room of darkness, depicting time before ancient philosopher of Western European self-understanding. So that's behind that circle, around the circle. And that's the walls of the seawall. So that's darkness. The actual first rear upper annular stage represents engines and volt values. The second annular ring forms the foundation for the age of enlightenment. The philosophy was again in resurgence after antiquity. So the second is actually this one. The third and middle ring carries revolutionary events like the 1913 October Revolution and the division of Budapest 1954. The fourth and lower ring provides space for literature and personalities from the previous century up to the Baader-Meinhof group's activities in Germany. Baader-Meinhof was a terror organization